Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to our session today, Promote Drupal, the Ultimate Toolkit. We're going to do some introductions and then we'll get started. So I'll begin. I'm Emma Horrell. I manage UX at Edinburgh University. Give it back to you.
Hi everyone, I'm Rose Gladden. I'm the Marketing VP at ImageX. We're a web design agency based in Vancouver, and today I have my Promote Drupal hat on even, as I've worked with the Promote Drupal committee on the Evaluator committee since about 2021, I believe.
Hello, I'm Paul. I'm from 1X Internet. I've been working with Promote Drupal for quite a few years now. I have been responsible for the social media for over a decade. I don't do that now. You might see me knocking around taking lots of photographs. I've also been involved in Promote Drupal, producing things like the pitch deck and various other projects. I did actually sit on a committee that was looking into how non-code contributions could be tracked in a fair way as well. So that's now available. So we're keen to talk about how people can contribute to Drupal and promote Drupal without being developers. So just a bit of a summary of what we're going to talk about today. The first thing is why it's so important that we all start to promote Drupal, specifically to new audiences, who we're trying to promote Drupal to, so that we can be effective in what we're doing, how you can help to better promote Drupal, and also what tools are available. So I mean, the first thing to state is I'm so pleased to see how many people are actually here today. I'd personally be very interested to find out who you all are. I mean, maybe perhaps, is anybody an end user of Drupal? That's great, welcome. Anybody run an agency or work for an agency? Oh, awesome. And is anybody working a marketing role? Perhaps maybe designers or content? Yeah. Oh, we've got a really good mix of people here, so that's good to see. So we've managed to attract the right audience anyway. So why is it important to promote Drupal to new audiences? We tend to come to this event and it's kind of like a little bubble. We might have our Drupal camps that we go to, and we might also as agencies have our own audiences that we promote to, but what we're trying to advocate here is to start to have a bit of a shift of mindset where we move outside of that bubble. There have been various moves to achieve that, so attending bigger conferences that are non-Drupal specific, also trying to get into the media, but that's what this talk is all about. We want to try and expand the awareness of Drupal. It's surprising when you start to speak to people that aren't in this little bubble that not that many people have heard of Drupal, but there's plenty that could definitely benefit from an awareness of it and using it in their businesses or their organizations. So I've no doubt that you're all rather good at, as agencies and maybe even as organizations, about promoting the work that you've done yourselves. But we're here to try and encourage you to join forces with us and with each other to start to market Drupal as a product, as a thing, rather than necessarily the work that you do with the tool. So there's been a lot of work in the last few years to start to position ourselves really well to be able to start to do this job. And I think if anyone's been to Drupal.org, you've seen some of the slides that Dries is using and also some of the slides around this conference. You're starting to see this new brand that's being rolled out. The Drupal Association have started to promote using this brand on LinkedIn and social media. And there are further enhancements to come to Drupal.org very soon, which we'll talk about in a moment. The brand's also been used at Web Summit Lisbon, which took place last year. So there was a consortium of agencies that helped to fund our participation in that event. So there were 70,000 attendees went there. And so this is a really good example of how we're actually getting the Drupal brand out there. So the agencies weren't there pitching their particular agency. They were just trying to make people raise awareness about Drupal, because certainly the likes of Adobe and other CMS platforms are at these conferences, and we want to make sure that if an organisation is thinking about a platform, that we're at least being considered to be added to the list there. So just to sort of get you into the new brand, if I can actually find where it is, we've got a video. So you may have seen this. It was first seen at DrupalCon Portland, but obviously some of us weren't there. I just want to give you a sense of the new brand. So I don't know about you guys, but I'm pretty excited by that when I first saw it. I thought, this is something I can really work with. I can do some things with this, and I take that and use it as a really powerful tool. So it's not just a video. There's obviously, in that video there was a design system and brand guidelines, which we've got links to in a moment, that you can take and use for yourselves. There's also slide decks available, and you'll start to see how this kind of visual presentation is going to start to trickle across everything with Drupal. So when everyone sees Drupal, they're always going to have this consistent messaging that's going to be visible and start to recognize it. So we've got this new brand. I want to just talk a little bit about how you can be really, really powerful in empowering the brand. So I'm going to talk about this thing called the network effect. So this is all about how the value of a product or a service increases as more people use it. It turns out that the network effect has been responsible for approximately 70% of all value created in technology since 1994. It's something that I've only relatively recently discovered, but it's really interesting in the Drupal context. But to just give you an idea of what it is, I'm going to talk about Uber. So in Uber, if you have an additional driver or multiple additional drivers, you might think as a taxi driver, that's competition. That's not a good thing. But actually, there is an indirect benefit for every single driver that comes to Uber, because their inventory gets larger. So if you imagine you're in Barcelona and you want to get a taxi, it's a bad example, isn't it? Because Uber has a hard time in Barcelona. But usually when you travel, you're going to get an Uber fairly quickly. It's a reliable service because they've got a large inventory. So the more drivers, the larger inventory, the more riders you get. And the more riders there are, the more money they spend, which benefits all the drivers. And so you get this cycle of as a platform is adopted and it increases, the value of the whole network increases. So what does that mean for Drupal and us? Well, So if you think about us, we're the producers. So end users are producers because they're actually commissioning agencies to build things. Agencies are producers because we're building things. So our inventory isn't just the tooling that we make, the software that we release, but it's also the marketing that we do. And even the end users, if they talk about the fact that they use Drupal, it is making a larger inventory of materials as well. So it's actually much, much more powerful if we all get behind this. And so if this larger inventory of modules and going to conferences and speaking about it is our larger inventory, more and more people become aware of it. And because there's more agencies in Drupal, we shouldn't see them as competitors because it just means there's potentially more customers and the spending goes up. So again, you've got this cyclical increasing effect. So what I want you to take from this is that actually what we should be doing is working together as agencies, and we should also be working together as end clients. If there are opportunities to perhaps build code together where things are common between you, that can have that effect as well, and it benefits you. And a perfect example of this is local gov Drupal. So in the UK, we have all of our country is broken up into local councils. All the local councils ultimately have to do the same thing. They've got to arrange the bins to be emptied. They've got to collect taxes. They've got to look after the roads, and they've got to do the schools and so on, and communicate with citizens. Well, somebody thought a long time ago at Croydon Council that it might make some sense that since they built this software, that another council could benefit from it. And that's where local gov Drupal was born. Some years down the line, we now have 16 official suppliers of local gov Drupal who are building it all together in a collaborative way. And also the councils are participating in building as well, and also informing what should be built. And it is an example of this network effect happening right there in Drupal. And the number of councils is growing very, very fast now. It's the obvious tool to use. So what I want to try and encourage is this notion of co-opetition. I don't know whether we even made that word up, but rather than us thinking as Drupal agencies and Drupal users that we should only market Drupal alone, we should start to do it together, because if we do a good job of that, everyone benefits. So Drupal.org is a really big focal point for building these types of connections between the producers and the consumers. If you're going to evaluate Drupal, it's very likely that you will have been through there to look at its functionalities and to decide whether or not it's a tool for you, but also to find a development partner to get support. It's where the Drupal market operates. So one of the big investments that the Drupal Association has made is to make a new and improved Drupal.org, and they've started to release some of the designs now. So you will start to, Dries featured this particular screenshot in his keynote yesterday, but you can actually go and try it out yourself today. So there's a website, if you go to new.drupal.org, you can go and try it, and you can provide feedback. So that's just the start of it as well, because when we come to DrupalCon Singapore, which is only in December, we're going to start to see additional landing pages for different sectors, so verticals of different types of end users of Drupal. And they are dramatically different to what's there already, emphasizing using the new branding, but also having very clear messaging about why Drupal is attractive to that specific sector, because it varies between different end users. But the problem we've got is the Drupal Association is tiny. The marketing team in the Drupal Association amounts to probably about 2 people. This is a really big project, and obviously there's a lot of people using Drupal out there, and we actually occupy only a small proportion of the internet. So you are our marketing team. We want everyone in this room to start to support that. And we can give you some really good examples of how you can actually get involved with that later on. So even since 2023, we're on a successful path here. We've seen a rise of certified partners of the Drupal Association, going from 45 up to 92. That's a massive success. Not only does it bring some revenue into the Drupal Association so they can hire more people, but it also means that there are people actively participating in supporting Drupal. If every single one of you in the room and every single one of these partners were to produce one case study, that would be several being released a month, 7 being released every month. And that puts a very strong message out to potential new users of Drupal that lots of organisations having great success with Drupal. So I want to hand over so that we can understand who the audience is. Thank
you. Thinking about this toolkit, about how we promote Drupal, and reflecting perhaps on what we know about Drupal, we do have to acknowledge that there's a target audience for Drupal. Drupal has universal appeal, so there's a huge target audience out there. And understanding them a little bit better is one of the key facets in the toolkit to promote it. And this is really where the work that I've been involved in comes in. So I've helped with the Promote Drupal initiative, and we spent a lot of time pondering the target audiences of Drupal, both in association with the work on Drupal.org and also more broadly working with the Drupal Association. Because people have a choice, right, when it comes to a CMS or a DXP these days, and the choices are growing. There are a lot more on the market. I can remember a Dries note from maybe 2 years ago when there were 1 or 2 picked out, and now there are a lot of products out there. So there's a lot of choice. And people have to make a decision. They have to weigh up which DXP do I go with, which CMS. So before we get into that, I want to unpick a little bit about how people in general make decisions as humans. So when this spectrum is quite nice as a graphic to illustrate this process. So when we as humans are in familiar territory, it's super easy to make a decision because you just rely on your norms and your habits and it feels comfortable. When we're less familiar, we draw on things like our intuition, our beliefs, heuristics, best practices, that kind of thing. But when we're in really unfamiliar territory, when it's a difficult decision, that's when we have to put a lot of cognitive effort in, doing a lot of analysis, calculations, comparisons, and so on. And so when it comes to promoting something and getting people to decide on Drupal, when they have to evaluate all the other products that are out there, we clearly want them to make it feel like this is a natural decision to go with Drupal, but we do have to acknowledge that there'll be people for whom Drupal is unfamiliar, and to get familiar with it, they'll have to do a bit of work. And this helps because it gives us an idea of what we can put out there and how we can make that process easier. So as part of the Promote Drupal initiative that I mentioned, we did a piece of UX research work to sort of understand this decision-making process a bit better. We looked at a lot of data that had been gathered from persona research, from people from different parts of organizations and also representing different industries. And what it came down to, there's a technique in UX called jobs to be done. And these are the kind of key tasks, get out of bed in the morning kind of tasks that people have in whatever context is applicable. So when it comes to evaluating something like Drupal, I'm deciding on my CMS. 4 broad things were on people's minds: to know what the CMS, so say Drupal, can do, be inspired by it, size up the costs, and feel reassured by the decision. I'm going to talk through each of these in a bit more detail. So the first one, this first job to be done on the mind of someone evaluating a CMS product, is about the now. So appraising Drupal and thinking, I have my targets, I have things that I need to get done in my organization. Where does Drupal fit with that? Can it achieve, for example, the kind of content structure that I want? Does it fit my editing model? Will it help me reach my goals and my targets that are kind of in the now? So knowing that Drupal can tick those boxes for them helps to satisfy that job. The next one is about looking into the future state, because as well as what's in the here and now, when people make a decision about a CMS, they're thinking into the future as well. They're thinking, where do we want to be in 5 years? is Drupal going to help us with that? Because we need to rely on our digital products, our websites, our suite of digital artifacts, or whatever it might be. Is Drupal going to help us get there? So this is another thing that would be on the mind of someone evaluating Drupal, to help them differentiate it between Drupal and other CMS products that are out there. The next one is a practical one. Organizations will be set up in a particular way with costs and resource and jobs. So again, to pick Drupal, it will need to fit with the existing current resource and budget, and people will make a decision to take it, to use it or not, if they can know in quantifiable terms what's needed to make it work, so that they can then plan for perhaps recruiting necessary talent or setting up working structures, organizing upskilling, onboarding, and all of that kind of thing. And finally, perhaps the most important job to be done on the mind of someone assessing DXP or CMS products, and really where Drupal can shine actually, is in terms of satisfying the need for compliance. Nobody wants to be sued. Risks of breaches of security, accessibility, and privacy. We heard a lot about that in the keynote just now. So being reassured that Drupal can take care of that is a job that somebody has on their mind when they're deciding a CMS. So Drupal can really shine in this regard. So where do people go to get this information? They have these jobs, these tasks on their mind when they're making a decision. Where do they go to find information to sort of satisfy these? Well, this is where we in the Drupal community can make a difference, because there are many examples of content that we can contribute to make Drupal shine in all of these regards. So some of the content that is quite kind of obvious, I guess, that's kind of clear of what we have in our armor are case studies, industry examples, appraisals, testimonials. But also things like people will look at the Drupal.org website and they'll look at how modules are described and how features are described. They'll have a look at documentation, they'll have a look at guides, and they'll make assessments on what Drupal's like from those kind of sources. So this is worth bearing in mind. If you or people you know work on this type of content, it's worth putting effort into it, because people can use this to make a decision about Drupal, and it can therefore be used as a really important way of promoting it. So here are just some examples that I've drawn from content on Drupal.org. So there's the blogs, as I said, the Drupal guides, documentation examples, case studies, which Rosie will talk about in a little bit. So whatever our role in the community, and also whoever we interact with in the community, we can encourage them to do a good job on this type of content, because it makes a difference when it comes to promoting Drupal. And yeah, more broadly, there are perhaps some less obvious sources, maybe outside of the kind of, I want to say, comfort zone of Drupal, that decision makers will go to, and we can support with that as well. So they might have conversations with their peers. Word of mouth counts for a lot in this space. Authentic accounts about how staff use Drupal and how they find it as a product, real lived experience. And this might be written in, for example, tech forums or peer forums, or shared at conferences outside of DrupalCons and meetups. So there are many more opportunities to talk and share about Drupal, and I think I have some screenshots of that, yes. So for example, the kind of articles that we've maybe all read comparing Drupal with WordPress, for example, or Drupal's strengths, or how it ranks, or which companies use it. All of this type of content we can contribute to promote Drupal more broadly, so that it becomes the first choice for people.
So how everyone else can help. So we wanted to give you some tangible takeaways, and although we love end users, this is probably more relevant to those in the room that are working at agencies. If you listen to the recent webinar for Drupal certified partners, there is a little bit of overlap here, so apologies if you've heard some of this before, but hopefully there'll be some new stuff as well. So as Paul showed earlier, Drupal.org is going through a bit of a transition. It's setting out to be the main resource for evaluators with the new branding, and when the personas that Emma has detailed evaluating Drupal come to that page, we obviously want them to to see themselves on the site and the stories we're telling there. So one piece of this is obviously the filtering, which comes from the stories that are there, but ultimately the control of the stories that are being told is within all of our hands, and helping paint a picture, supporting that message for industries and use cases and things that people require in their projects. So with this in mind, we've mentioned case studies is obviously one of the main ways to help us better promote Drupal. Building out that repository of recent case studies on Drupal.org, helping show expertise and those different use cases, building trust and credibility around why Drupal is that best fit, explaining some complexities that maybe prospects, certainly with a non-technical hat on, might not be sure how to solve, and creating that social proof through testimonials and different stories from different areas. So you might have seen on Drupal.org, and I think we're all culprits of this, that if we create case studies for agencies, we often copy and paste ultimately onto Drupal.org. In that scenario, though, the agency and the client is often the hero of that story, and Drupal is kind of an add-on. Whereas when we're looking at content on Drupal.org itself, we want to shift that focus so that it becomes a Drupal first case study, and then Drupal is that hero alongside the end user. So on the following slides, I am detailing a few kind of quick wins that we can think about taking existing content, adapting that to help it be better positioned on Drupal.org. So one really easy thing here is the title. You know, when you're creating content for case study, think about the title. I think often, and I know in my career I've done this, but we'll just use a company name or, I don't know, a D7, D10 migration, and that's it. So here's some examples that I've selected. These are existing on Drupal.org now, where organizations have pulled key aspects of Drupal and key functionality that is one of the reasons why they might have been chosen for that. And they've just placed it in the title itself. So I think it gives really good examples of where the strengths and requirements are, like multilingual, multi-site, large-scale publishing, things like that. Secondly, we have the Government of Yukon example. So this is quite subtle, but when opening a case study with high-level content around why Drupal specifically, rather than why an agency or the summary of the project itself necessarily, it just shifts that focus towards the Drupal as a product, and helps showcase all the things that we're trying to reach a wider audience with that information. Some of you in the room might recognize this one. So next we've got the Union for International Cancer Control, so 1X Internet. It's got some really good things happening here. So here on the left, I've got social proof. This is a testimonial from the client themselves that's actually referencing Drupal. I know sometimes you can't get these sorts of pieces of content, but when it is something that an organization is able to find or able to get, it just gives that gravitas behind why that product is the best option. And then on the right here, think about the layout of the content, making it a little bit easier to use. Emma's expertise is user experience. That comes into the visual aspect of the content in terms of words as well as visuals. So here they've showcased some of the key pieces of the project itself. This could be taken even further and taking really digestible pieces around, why Drupal. It could be even like all the key aspects of Drupal and how they've how the product helps the project needs. And then finally, I've got Penn State here. This is a Media Current case study within the back end of Drupal.org. Currently, you are prompted with a why Drupal section if you're creating a case study there. I think often people just will see a sentence or nothing as detailed as maybe this. So although there's some really good quality detail, it's very digestible. Think about bullet points. It doesn't have to be a huge body of prose, but some key areas here for why the product was chosen. And then at the bottom here, we've got a really nice example of linking to additional resources where Drupal's features and benefits were explored further. So in this case, it was a webinar with the Drupal Association where the case study is explored further, and it's kind of a win-win for the agency here because we're linking out to additional resource where they're getting a bit more showcase, but equally the product itself is getting a lot more exploration and detail there. So think about all the other assets that you maybe have that you can link in there as well. So then when you've created all this great content, there is a fairly recent development here where there is a form which the Drupal Association have. It's on the Promote Drupal page where you can actually submit a case study for featuring on the social pages for the Drupal Association. So here, like Paul mentioned, if as agencies, even just the Drupal certified agency, but equally those that aren't, if we're submitting one piece a year, you've got 100 plus pieces of content that the DA can utilize. Like Paul mentioned, their team is very small. So, if we can all contribute, even in a tiny way, it really helps spread that message. So just to summarize in terms of case studies themselves, so, review existing case studies on Drupal.org. Everything's getting a bit of an overhaul in terms of the visual perspective. You'll have seen that already on the case study pages, but this is a really great time to think about the content, your visual pieces, have some of your older case studies, maybe you're still working with those companies and actually the projects have developed and there's more content you can add to them. Maybe you've got links to video content you can use. And then the really great quality case studies will get, I believe, elevated to some other places on Drupal.org as the IA gets developed and adapted. So within that content, really think about the benefits of Drupal as a platform. Make them the hero of the story. We're all here for a reason. We're all working with Drupal. The more outside of the community organizations that come into the community, the more pie there is effectively for all of us. Submit that social content and then help share far and wide. If you have existing profiles and you have any issues accessing your case studies, then just contact partnerships@association.drupal.org. So a bit of a recap. So some of these pieces that Emma mentioned as well help us better market Drupal is to review those, the content's already there. And then there's this piece around expanding our event marketing as a community. So, think about putting sessions forward to non-community events, like we saw Web Summit last year. It doesn't have to be on that large scale. We could put forward sessions at smaller organizations, even regional, local events. Think about submitting articles outside of the community, so places like Tech Times, Inc., Forbes, all of those places. And think about the stages of the buyer funnel as well. So we obviously need content at all stages of the marketing funnel. So that's awareness, interest, desire, and action. So helping move people through from, unaware to aware, and ultimately, hopefully, joining us in the Drupal community. And then, if you're going to events already, let the Drupal Association know so they can help support that. And then finally, think about the different content formats. So, video, guest speaking on industry podcasts. As a marketer, I know that there's kind of endless channels and we all only have so much time, but just a little bit from everyone really goes a long way. We're greater than the sum of our parts. And then we've got available resources. So as you saw earlier, and Paul mentioned, there is a digital asset management platform, so Drupal DAM. This I have a link to here on the next line. So all of the brand assets are available on the brand portal. The Promote Drupal link here will take you to the Promote Drupal page on Drupal.org, where there's lots of links to investigate. And then if you feel called to, join us. So we're always looking for more volunteers at Promote Drupal. We've doing everything and anything to help broaden the reach of the message, and we'd love to have more people there. Oh, shall I leave it? I'll leave that up in case you need it. But any questions, let us know.
So much for presenting this session. I think the initiative and effort is much needed, and I'm super excited about the new look and feel. A question I have is, who, in terms of brand guidance, who's in charge of the brand and managing how people are using it?
So, yeah, there is, in terms of who's in charge in the governance, our understanding is that the brand asset came from Acquia and the team at Acquia. So if there are, I guess it depends what the question is regarding. If it's, should I use this in the correct way to align with the brand guidelines, then certainly my understanding would be that would be the Acquia team who put it together, because it kind of all works as a whole. But certainly Promote Drupal and the Drupal Association are monitoring that as well. So ultimately Acquia, but also if there are other questions, then we're happy to field them, because it's quite new and quite newly launched. There are questions emerging, around that. So it's helpful for us to know about that as well. So does that sort of answer your question?
Yeah, I think the question stems from, first, who will maintain it going forward, because I think from my point of view in the community, we have struggled a bit with this in our identity, and this is such a strong brand that I want to make sure that we're using it well. And then I have the second follow-up to that.
So Sean,
Sean Parrott,
who was working on a voluntary basis from Acquia, was the person who was the driving force behind the brand. So he's produced the brand guidelines, and he was in a session this morning in this room, and he was saying that there's still work to be done to have a bit more governance around it. So actually having the brand is fantastic, but the next step is to kind of publish how that's to be looked after for the long term. An example was given, there are the association websites that have been built in Europe that don't align to that brand. So the sites look fantastic, but they've used the older brand. So there's still a lot of work to be done. I think the important thing to realise here is that do something. And you don't need permission to do it either. But if you want some help, come to the Slack and ask questions, and maybe you can be part of helping to define that.
Great, thank you.
Hiya. I do apologise, as usual, it's not a question, more of a comment, but I've got a lot of experience. I attend a lot of accessibility meetups through webinars, or we do things. I'm quite passionate about accessibility. And I've found myself, by the way, I work at the University of Edinburgh, so Emma's looking at me, but essentially I am inadvertently promoting Drupal, because I'm really passionate about what we're doing for accessibility at the University of Edinburgh, and Drupal is a critical, key foundation, stone part of that. And so I'm talking to sectors, and the accessibility communities, the webinars that I go to are very wide-ranging. It can be, also the European Accessibility Act coming up next year, so you've got a lot of sectors like financial sector, travel, e-learning, sectors that were not thinking initially. Now the legislation's coming, there's going to be a lot of people who are looking at their existing providers and thinking, who do it? And so I'm realizing that I'm part of this. I'm not consciously saying I'm selling Drupal, but I'm aware that I'm promoting Drupal in a way, And this is just more of just an observation that it's sometimes interesting that you can be participating in networks and communities and then realizing that, as you say, sometimes you might reference the brand, but actually deep down, you're actually promoting Drupal. And I think that's a mindset to have, not just for accessibility, but for many other aspects of what the platform offers. So, sorry, not a question.
It's fantastic to hear your advocacy. I thought you were going to point out part of the slides weren't accessible, because I was thinking that myself. And
I'm being polite today.
We're some of the early people using the brand, and some
I'm
of the
sure
things
the
I've
brand
noticed.
guidelines have got the
And we've probably broken
colour
the
ratios
rules.
spot on. I'm absolutely.
I would just add to that as well, like you may have heard, the brand is effectively what people say about you when you're not in the room, right? So it goes for the product. So whatever, we're all ambassadors of the product. If we can get as much cohesion as possible, and to the lady that asked before, it's very difficult to have that level of governance, but like Paul said, a little bit from everyone, and we can take a tiny step forward towards it.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you for the presentation. My question might be quite basic, but I'm rather new to Drupal. So I heard a lot of good arguments for open source. For instance, you mentioned the network effect. But to me, what would you say is what should I be aware of that a client, for instance, presents? What characteristics should I be aware of, and then think immediately, okay, Drupal would be the best option here to use among other different frameworks, if that makes sense.
I think this links into the sort of 4 categories of what clients are looking for in a CMS. So I certainly would say security, stability is one of Drupal's key strengths. So a client might not ask for that specifically, but it is, for kind of ticking the legal boxes, it's really important. So it's maybe something to make them aware that Drupal does really well. Everything else in terms of knowing what its functionality is and knowing how it can provide a vision and that kind of thing, it can align very much to what they want. So it's sometimes a question of listening first and then maybe putting the strengths of Drupal forward, because one of the strengths is its flexibility. So it's almost understanding what they're looking for and then being aware of Drupal as the product and the multiple solutions that we can put forward to enhance it. But certainly, I don't know if you'd agree, but I think the security is one of our key facets that would set us apart from some of the competition, and our longevity, the kind of track record that we have.
I mean, it's a big question. Lots of different sectors will find Drupal appealing for different reasons. One of the long enduring things that is very powerful and unique about Drupal is the flexibility of the content model. So being able to store content in a structured way and present it in lots of different ways is really powerful and rare in a CMS. And also the way that you can control the access to that content in different ways. So it fits a lot of requirements for very broad-ranging organisations. The other thing which is really outstanding, and we saw this yesterday in the Dries note, was the things like the AI in Drupal. There were discussions in February, March time, and they're now actually real. The velocity at which the community, when they get behind something to achieve something, is absolutely incredible. So being able to maintain with the pace of digital as it's continually accelerating is really attractive. And not necessarily at the cost of the customer. It can be the community.
Can I give a quick follow-up question? It was just, you mentioned that the network effect, it gets stronger, of course, the more users you have, it produces. But you have larger open source frameworks. And you talked about stability and security. Wouldn't that, in that term, be more strengthened in some of these networks that has more producers and more users? For instance, I don't know, WordPress maybe, because there's more contributors.
It's difficult to make a direct comparison between Drupal and WordPress, for example, because of the way that the community actually produces the code. Whereas in Drupal, there's a lot of focus on the contributed modules in a central place. A lot of other open source communities, it's not quite like that. And it might be a single agency is developing a particular functionality. So they miss out on this network effect because they keep it close to them, or they might be the owner of it, and it's difficult to contribute to it. So also, I think Drupal is one of the largest highest number of active participants in contribution. So whilst other platforms might have a bigger footprint, the community that's behind them might not be proportionally the same.
All right, at the back, this is Glenn from ImageX, and great job, Emma, Paul, and Rosie, especially Rosie. Question and a comment. So you talked about conferences and talked about partnering up. One of the things Rosie and I were talking about earlier is just the challenge it is in today's realm. We've all talked about the squeeze that's happening right now. We see it with our clients. Many agencies are experiencing this squeeze. And some agencies, smaller agencies especially, it's very expensive to go to conferences, to sponsor conferences. Some of them could be spending a third of their budget just on going to Drupal events. So if you were thinking about bang for the buck, what would be the biggest things that a smaller agency could do to be able to help impact Drupal, but also help themselves to get more clients?
I'm not going to give away our secrets, Glenn. I think if you're limited by budget, just in my experience, content, you don't need technically to spend any money on content. I think if you can find, or even, a general marketer or somebody on your team, you don't need a marketing team, dare I say. If you can create content, you have a point of view or you have stories to tell, get it out there. And it's doesn't have to be perfect. It can just be something. Get the messaging out. Every time you do it, you'll get a bit better. Think about, a quick piece to camera. We've all got computers in our pockets every day. So, capture those stories, get them out, build those relationships in the community. Even, Paul and Emma put messages out about this session. I'm sharing them. We're sharing each other's content. Tap into that community piece within Drupal as well. And just think about your storytelling and your messaging and go from there.
Awesome.
I would say.
Thanks for that. So, and here's my comment. So this is for those of you who are end users. So Rosie was mentioning just, that last section was mostly for the agencies, but one thing for the end users, to say to you folks, when we've been going to conferences over the years, it's been absolutely fantastic to partner with our clients. Together with them, we've been able to do some case studies going to conferences like EduWeb and Higher Ed Web, PSE Web. Being at these events and being able to do case studies together, sometimes even our clients will come and don our t-shirts and stand at our booth with us, and they're amazing promoters of Drupal. So there's people who are skeptical of Drupal or just checking out Drupal, or I didn't even know Drupal was still around. They come to your booth and talk to you, and hearing it directly from people who are end users is so much more impactful than hearing it from us as agencies. So just a little thing out there, work together with your agency and help spread the news about Drupal.
And there's an advantage to end users participating as well.
Sorry?
In that. Sorry.
Oh, okay. EduWeb, Higher Ed Web, and PSE Web, there are 3 different conferences in North America. PSE Web is in Canada, and the other 2 are in, sorry about that. I didn't mention any European conferences.
Well, there is a local Gov annual conference as well in the UK, so there are equivalents across the world. Just to say, organisations like University of Edinburgh, one way to, if you're surfacing the fact that you're using Drupal at a DrupalCon, it's a really good, and you're delivering great projects. It's a great hiring technique. You tend to, people want to work with good organisations, so they can have that knock-on effect as well.
Yeah, just to add to your question about getting the message out there, I think as well, breaking it down by discipline and not necessarily in industry sectors. So I work in UX, but I would attend a content design meetup or a UX meetup or a interaction design meetups, and these all bring together people that are all trying to make good web pages or good digital experiences, and the processes behind that require something like Drupal. You know, they require the technology to do what we want to do, so I think that's another good like outlet, and maybe not as expensive as attending a conference, but more grassroots, because sometimes you can meet somebody in those meetups and then that can lead to other things. So I would just add that in there.
I mean, just to answer your other question, you were talking about content. Things like webinars are a good idea because you don't have to travel. But also, in the past, I've paid to go to industry-focused events at hotels where they get lots of targets to stay for the weekend, and you pay to be able to speak in front of them, just like this. But they're your high-value targets, so you can be really focused if you want to go after a particular sector. So I found that to be really successful as well.
Thank you. Thank you.